Hey, folks. Hope you had an awesome Hanukkah and are celebrating any other holidays with great joy. I'm Andros,
I'm Bryan.
and we got a real treat for you this week, don't we, Brian?
Oh man, I'm so excited for everyone to listen to this episode.
And we have a special end of the year contest for our listeners.
Ooh, we're getting fancy. Getting
Oh,
fancy.
oh yeah. Well, at the end of this episode, you're going to hear an ad for Dunkin' Donuts featuring Al Pacino. And no, we don't have an exciting new sponsor. This commercial is in the movie we're covering today. In the commercial, there are a whole mess of Al Pacino references, and we decided to run a little contest for our listeners to see if we could find them all. If you can name all the films referenced in the Dunkachino commercial, you will be invited to pick a film for us to cover on the show. And if you want, you can join us for the conversation, launching yourself into a career of international stardom as a famous podcaster. And here's how it works. You got to send your list of Al Pacino references to us at contact@theworldiswrongpodcast.com, and please write Dunkachino contest in the subject heading because it's just fun to write Dunkachino. If more than one person gets all the references, we'll do a random drawing to determine the winner, who will be announced in the intro to our first episode of the new year, which will be focusing on the Hot Rock from 1972. Look forward to it, people.
Yeah. Oh man, I want to enter this contest. I want to pick a movie for this podcast.
Yeah, how many, and don't say which ones they are, but how many, if you just off the top of your head, how many do you think you could just name?
5?
I'm about
Yeah,
the same
I think
way.
I can do.
Yeah, I think I can do about 5.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, this is thrilling.
But when you watch it, don't you also kind of feel like, wait, is that a reference? Like he'll say things, and you're
Right?
like, is that from a movie?
Yeah.
Did he say that in Bobby Deerfield? like
Right there. How deep do they go?
we
Yeah.
need some Pacino scholars for this one. So if you are that person, please help us out, because it's kind of keeping me up a little bit, knowing that there are references in there that I don't know. So we wanted to correct one thing. This episode is devoted to a beloved to us and a beloved to a rare few Adam Sandler film. And Brian, you're kind of an aficionado. You're an expert in Adam Sandler. You get invited on podcasts to talk about this guy on a regular basis, don't you?
Yeah, actually, there's a podcast I want to give a shout out for, which is the Billy Gilmore podcast. A bunch of great guys that used to work at Vulcan, huge Sandler fans. And on our episode, when you listen to it, I talk about how we're the first people to really go through this movie. What I meant was the way we go through it. There's other people did it before us, and that's the Billy Gilmore podcast. And they've gone through they're chronologically every Adam Sandler movie, and it's amazing. I've been a guest on a few other episodes I did. I was on their first episode for Billy Madison, which was great. You should listen to that. And then I pleaded and asked to be on the anger management episode, so I did that one too. And then I was on the really big, huge Grown Ups 2 episode, which is like epic. I think it's like 4 hours long. But check them out. They're on Instagram. They're all over the place. Like the Billy Gilmore podcast is great, and it's a great bunch of gentlemen who do it. It's very fun.
So did Billy Gilmore used to work at Vulcan Video?
That's just a name. It's a play on Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore. So,
You're blowing my mind, Brian.
but it also kind of sounds like a guy who'd be like a bass player in like a blues band or something. Like, oh, I love the way Billy Gilmore plays that bass.
Like what's Billy Gilmore's, like he's got to have that middle name, like Billy Fat Fingers Gilmore.
I like that. But anyways, I'm very excited for people to hear this episode. This episode means a lot to me. And you know what? Jack and Jill covers many holidays. So if you're listening to this after Christmas or after Hanukkah or after New Year's or whatever, it doesn't matter. You can still watch this movie and it'll still be good.
Basically, every day with Jack and Jill is a holiday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's get to it.
Hi, I'm Bryan.
And I'm AJ,
And we have a podcast called The Director's Wall.
examining a filmmaker's career film by film. First up was M. Night Shyamalan, then Francis Ford Coppola. Who's next? Is there anything to this whole auteur theory? Find out on
The Director's Wall.
Subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your preferred listening platform.
I'm Larry Bishop, and you're listening to the World is Wrong podcast.
We're here to tell you how the world is wrong. The world is wrong about
Jack and Jill.
Okay, you're excited about it. Welcome, folks. This is the World is Wrong podcast, an extremely positive podcast where we celebrate films the world is wrong about. I am Andros Jones, one of your hosts.
And I'm Bryan Connolly, the other host.
Yes, between us, we are Andros and Bryan, your hosts. And you gave me a really sweet holiday gift this year, Bryan. I want to say how much I appreciate it. This film we're covering has brought me so much joy, and I'm so happy to be discussing it with you. What are we here to talk about?
We are here to talk about the Adam Sandler masterpiece, Jack and Jill. I am so excited to talk about this. Like, I've been a champion of this movie since day one when I saw it, opening night at the movie theater. I paid money and stood in line because I knew then it was going to be great. And I've seen it more than most movies, so I'm ready for this.
Wait, isn't this the worst film featuring the worst actor and the worst actress of 2011?
You know, we're going to get it. There's so much the world is wrong about, but let me tell you the plot first because like there's going to be like a lot about how the world is wrong about this movie, many levels, like tears. Like there's like I have like a chart with yarn connecting things on my wall just about Jack and Jill.
What do you think? Would Al Pacino ever do a Dunkin' Donuts commercial?
Yeah.
Shut up. Did my wife call?
Yeah, you're all set for the cruise. You guys leave a week after Hanukkah.
Okay, all right. There's some good news.
Yeah, she converted, right? That's so cool. She doesn't look Jewish at all.
Wow, that was anti-Semitic.
What? No, I just...
See, I can say that. You can't. You're not Jewish.
No, but I'm close.
What does that mean?
I'm an atheist.
You're 2 for 2 right there.
What? No.
Anyways, did my sister say what time she's flying in tomorrow?
Yeah, I was supposed to pick her up at noon, but she switched the flight to earlier, so now she gets in at 4 in the morning.
Why?
Something about jet lag.
She never listens. She gains 3 hours. Every year she acts like she's flying to New Zealand.
She's a freak, man.
Yeah, again, you can't say that.
No,
So, plot pretty basic, okay? You got what seems like a basic plot. So you have this character named Jack, played by Adam Sandler. It is the holiday time. It is Thanksgiving. So his sister Jill, played by Adam Sandler, comes to visit. She annoys him. They are twins, but he is just not interested in their relationship. He doesn't like her. He finds her annoying. And everywhere she goes, other people are perplexed by her or bothered by her. And he is an ad exec. He runs like an advertising agency. And the big score is they need to get Al Pacino to sign on to do this coffee drink at Dunkin' Donuts. How are they going to get the great actor Al Pacino? Well, luckily, Al Pacino, playing Al Pacino, falls in love with Jill, is the only person, one of the only people who isn't annoyed by her, isn't bothered by her, because she's from the Bronx and he is from the Bronx, and like he just head over heels for her, falls in love. And so then Jack says, well, this is a great way to kind of use my sister to get Al Pacino to sign on to work for my ad agency. And that's the gist of the plot. And it starts at Thanksgiving, works through Hanukkah, ends on New Year's. No Christmas celebrated. I think there's Christmas lights in the background on a cruise ship, but it's not a thing that people do in this movie because it's an Adam Sandler movie. And of course, because it's an Adam Sandler movie, it's got all the actors that kind of come with Adam Sandler, his stock players, if you would. You have your Alan Covert playing the same homeless character from Happy Gilmore. You have David Spade also playing a woman. You have Norm Macdonald. You have Tim Meadows. You have Dana Carvey. All the people like from that era, that great early 90s era of SNL. So that's the movie. Pretty simple comedy plot. But man, there's so much more to this movie than that.
So, Bryan, you got to tell us, how is the world wrong about Jack and Jill?
Oh my God. The world is so wrong about this that it makes me want to move to another world. Like a world where there's at least more than 5 people that are right. Because I can't think of the world being so wrong about a movie. Like, this is the most wrong the world has ever been. It's hated by all critics, all film critics instantly and still hate it. Like, there's still, when you look it up on Rotten Tomatoes, there are still reviews coming out this year from critics about how shitty this movie is. It's like they can't shake it. People don't like this movie. People are snobs about this movie. People won't even give this movie a chance. This came out sort of soonish after Funny People, the James L. Brooks Adam Sandler movie. And many people were like, oh, that looks like one of the fake crappy movies that Adam Sandler's character in Funny People would make. So that's wrong. And then even people that like this movie, and they're few and far between, they haven't quite dug into what this movie's really about and what's really interesting about it. Which there was a lot of things really interesting about it. And so, yeah, I can't think of, like, I kind of was like, when we started doing the show, I knew that I couldn't wait. Like, this was my Mad Dog time, but I didn't want to do it right away. Like, I wanted to sit on it for a bit because I wanted to make sure we did it like really right. And it also could have looked like a stunt pick. If we did it early on, it could have been like, oh, now they're doing a crappy Adam Sandler movie and saying it's good. So I think it was good to wait a few months and just like, so we can really genuinely tell people that this movie's actually good, really good. Not just good or not just watchable, but like a great, great movie.
Yeah. It's cliche, but I laughed and I cried in this film. It entertained me. It broke my heart. It was fully entertaining. I loved it. Loved it. And then I shared it with my mother, and she loved it.
That warms my heart. It's a Hanukkah miracle.
I sent you the email. She's just like, I cried. And Al Pacino is awesome.
So where do we even start with this? I feel there's so many, like I said, like I got the yarn going crisscross. Like there's so much to kind of dig into, and I don't want this to be longer than the movie Jack and Jill, but there's still a lot to talk about. Like, where do we even... Well, I mean, here's an easy place to start. This movie is actually funny. I'm not laughing at it because it's stupid. Like, this movie has such great comedy. Like, such good... Like, I think a few episodes back I complained that, like, slapstick and, like, kind of visual humor is kind of lost in movies. Not in this movie. Like, this movie has sight gag after sight gag, and it's so good. Like, you laugh consistently until you cry, of course. But, like, I guess let's talk about that for a second, because this movie's been accused of being unfunny, the opposite of funny. Like, that's a lot of the critics, the first thing they talk about is this movie is not funny at all. It's a comedy in words only. On paper, they say it's a comedy, but there's nothing to laugh about in this film.
What? How do you? I mean, it's funny. Well, it's not funny. I don't even know how to argue with when people say it's not funny. It's like people saying it's boring. It's like I can't convince you that something I find is funny or is interesting is not boring or unfunny to you.
Yeah.
So it's one of those weird, like, at the same time, you're saying that it's not funny is the same as me trying to convince you that it is. Like, it sort of from a platonic ideal of comedy, this is a very well-written comedy. The jokes are, you know, like, it never stops, even though there's heartbreaking and beautiful moments in it, and there's some, I think, some seriousness underpinning the film that we'll get into. It just has the rhythm of a comedy, and Adam Sandler is funny. And I could talk about moments in the film, like there's a sight gag where where Jill is playing with the jet ski in the swimming pool. And it's one of those things that, like, if I describe it to you, it's dumb. That's yeah, it's dumb. Like, comedy sometimes it's okay if something entertains you that's just kind of stupid. That's what, like, if you watch that and you're like, well, that's just boring, or that's not funny. It's like, okay, I get it. Your life has a little bit less joy than mine does. I'm sorry. but I'm just thinking about it again and I'm laughing again. So it is, it's funny to me.
Yeah. And this is like the argument I have whenever I probably defend Adam Sandler more than any other person who makes movies and is in movies than anybody. Like, definitely when I worked at the video store, this was like the one thing that I had to constantly fight over. Not even fight over, just like I had felt like I had to like overtly champion him, but I wouldn't. That's not correct, because I agree in the amount of championships and champions and awards and things in my mind that I give Adam Sandler. Like, it's like, it is funny. It's always, his movies have always been funny, and this is like the problem with even the supposed Adam Sandler fans. People like love his early stuff, like love the SNL, Happy Gilmore era. And then they kind of start dismissing and throwing all his stuff away, and then kind of treat it like he used to be funny and then he got into this garbage. But it's like, I've been there always. Like, I've never left his side in terms of a fan. And I've always found his movies funny. And like, they're what you want from a comedy. They're not terribly long. He's funny. He lets other people in the movie be really funny. And it's just the joke after joke. The jokes land from beginning to end. And that's a good comedy. Like, it doesn't have to be made with an artist's eye in terms of the filmmaking. It doesn't matter. Just make me laugh. And that's what Adam Sandler is very, very good at, and has always been very good at for me. And many other people. Like, this movie wasn't a failure. Like, people there are people, like regular people in this country, who love Adam Sandler. There's a reason why Netflix keeps signing him for like 6-7 picture deals. Like, his new movie that came out recently, Hubie Halloween, was a hit on Netflix. Like, so for people to say that it isn't funny, it just wasn't funny to you, or you weren't willing to find what was funny in it.
The film, which had a budget of $79 million, that's a hefty budget for the film, but it made 149.7 at the box office. So it was a hit.
Yeah.
So some people liked it. You're right. Some people, it's just none of them wrote anything online about it.
Yeah, it's this weird snobbery that comes with I have this all the time when I champion Jerry Lewis. Not so much some people like, or like the Three Stooges, where people are like, oh, that's lowbrow, that's crap, like, that's not smart. But it's still hard to do silly comedy. Like, you still can be a genius at being stupid in a movie. Like, that's what great comedians can do, And it's just weird. It's this weird intellectual war. Like, I remember when Grown Ups 2 came out. It came out the same time as the Guillermo del Toro movie Pacific Rim. And all the film snobs online were upset that Grown Ups 2 beat Pacific Rim at the box office. And Pacific Rim failed. And Grown Ups 2 made like hundreds of millions of dollars. And there was like this sort of disdain for the success that Adam Sandler has, which is stupid. And then it's just like, it just keeps following him whenever he makes movies. And even when he makes a really good movie that everyone likes, like Punch Drunk Love or Uncut Gems, everyone always looks at it as the exception of like, well, he finally made a good thing in that sea of shit that he, churns out. And they're wrong. They're 100% wrong. Like, this movie has as much interesting stuff to say as an Uncut Gems, if not maybe more, honestly. So like, I just don't like this. I don't want to hear ever again that Adam Sandler's not funny. He is a comedian. He's a comedian that is popular. you don't think he's funny? Okay, well, maybe I don't think Dane Cook's funny, but I would respect if you think Dane Cook's funny. Good for you.
Are you asking if I think that Dane Cook is funny?
No, I'm just saying the word. I don't like that's a silly critique of like it's not funny. If they say it's funny, then it's funny to somebody. Like comedy is more like it's not like horror where like yeah, it's like you're gonna be upset by violence or something that jumps out at you. You're just like gonna instinctively go and jump out of the way. Or if something is like really depressing, you're gonna feel sad. But with comedy, some people are not gonna think it's funny, but you have to recognize that other people will. One other person will think something's funny.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk with you about, and so I said at the beginning of this that I felt like this was a particular gift for me. And maybe this can also get us into talking about something, the stuff that's really unique about this film and maybe informs some of the dynamic that has you feeling like you have to work so hard to defend Adam Sandler and Jerry Lewis. So I am someone so I'm Jewish. I've talked about it on the show. And anti-Semitism is a very difficult conversation to have. Feels like it's more difficult than talking about other oppression patterns. Maybe just it's more misunderstood. Like, I get that like Nazis are anti-Semitic, but as long as we're not dealing with concentration camps, it's probably not a conversation that's worth having, is sort of how it's treated. But this film starts right off. Like the first scene with Adam Sandler, he has an assistant who's like saying nasty things about his sister and making weird references to Judaism that the Sandler character immediately is calling out as like saying, oh, there's your anti-Semitism. And so since we started doing this podcast and I've started looking at films in a way like, oh, I'm going to talk about them, I've been noticing that usually films tell you, I probably should have known this anyway, but really it's come into a really stark relief, is that films kind of tell you at the beginning of the movie what they're about. And this film and the way that it creates the Jill character as this she's a Jewish woman, and the negativity that gets thrown at her, the situations she gets herself into or that the world puts her in, feels like the film is very clearly taking on anti-Semitism, particularly as it hits Jewish women. And I feel like this is one of the ways that the film is like, so I was one of those people who hadn't seen the film, and I had just seen some clips, and I thought that the film was the opposite of that it was Adam Sandler and his bro humor mocking a woman like the Jill character. And I just didn't want to see that. I mean, that might, you think that that's what you're going to get, but it's the opposite. He actually uses that sort of bro comedy quality that he has to undercut the Adam Sandler character, the Jack character, and highlight how wonderful Jill is and how wrong the world is to treat her the way it does. And you mentioned that Al Pacino is one of the only characters in the film who loves her and recognizes what's great about her, but it's also Jack's kids. You see the way that the kids relate to her, and again, they haven't learned the prejudice of the world yet, and so they just see her as and I as a Jewish kid, I have relatives who are like that, who are like, when I was a kid, I just saw them as the most, like, just like the wonderful Aunt so-and-so. And then maybe as an adult, I would be more embarrassed if they like showed up at a concert or something And then I was like, oh, it's my, and even that, it's like this sort of what would be called internalized anti-Semitism, which I feel like the Jack character is also carrying. So when I watched this film, it really just, that was it's very funny. And I feel like maybe there's one other piece I want to share here. There's a concept of a contradiction in psychology. And the idea is that if there's something that, like if there's something you're very frightened of, seeing that thing, the frightening aspect of it, isn't going to allow you to move any of the feelings about it. But if there's something you're frightened of, and then you see a comedy where that thing is getting pushed around, or or an action film where that thing is getting punched in the face, it allows you to have the emotional, the emotions can move, and that's called a contradiction. So like if you're afraid of seeing that thing become smaller and laughable makes it easier for your brain to process the trauma around it. And so the fact that this film, which is a very goofy comedy, at the center of it is really pushing this idea of like, why do we treat Jewish women this way? And it's funny, when I talked to my mom about it, she was like, well, it's women. It's a certain kind of woman, and she's like Penny Marshall. I'm like, so like Jewish women, like it's so big that sometimes even if it's happening to you, you can't see it for that, because no one ever talks about anti-Semitism. But here we have Adam Sandler, this goofy ass bro who nobody likes and nobody has any respect for, making a film that allows that conversation that I've been dying to have happen there, and now happen here, and be able to happen in a conversation with my mother that you could never get out of a more serious exploration of it. And
yeah,
I think that's one of the things that takes it from being like, is it funny or isn't it funny, to what is it about you? Like, what does it say about you that you choose to hate this film that's taking on the way that people, whether they know it or not, like Adam Sandler's assistant in the film, have all of these prejudgments about certain kinds of people that, like my mom was like, well, you're talking about the Bronx. Again, yeah, it's like Al Pacino's not Jewish, and he falls in love with Jill because they're from the same neighborhood. And there's something to that. But I just feel like that's a really powerful conversation the film is bringing up. And then when you told me about it, you said that you and your wife ended up having a conversation about that as well.
Yeah, we watched the movie for the 400th time or whatever. And because it's right, like you really like the character of Jill. Like the trailer makes it seem like she's gonna be this obnoxious like person rolling through this, destroying this movie, but you really instantly like her.
She's adorable.
And I don't know about you, but like I forget about it being Adam Sandler and drag, and I'm just kind of drawn into this character of Jill. Like it's a great performance. Like I completely forget about it being Adam Sandler, and I'm sort of looking at this woman in this movie. And the fact that like the people who hate this movie, critics and stuff, really locked in on the character of Jill and being like, God, she's so annoying. I hate her voice. They made her, like, the way she looks is just kind of gross. And it's just like, oh, like, just what an like maybe the most obnoxious character he's ever thought of. And why would anyone want to watch this stupid movie about these stupid people? And it's like, well, okay, well, you're the next Swardson character at the beginning of the movie, telling Jack that his sister is all these bad things, and him being like, you can't do that. I can do that, but you can't do that. And it just, and it's when you read these reviews, and it's the thing about, I think a lot of racism and anti-Semitism and sexism is people don't even realize that that's what they're tapping into. And my wife said, like, I think the people who really hate this movie, there's some anti-Semitic, anti-woman, anti-Jewish woman thing going on. They might not even realize is going on in their head. You know, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's like the film is saying, Adam Sandler is saying, I love this woman, and the world is saying, well, we hate her, and we hate you too.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to take those people seriously? Like, it makes you call into question anything else that they say. Like, if you hate this film, Well, if you hate this film, then you need to have a conversation about anti-Semitism to like be open to that conversation, because it might not be at all anti-Semitic. You might have, there might be some issue in this. Like maybe the way that the homeless guy, that Otto character is treated, like you have such strong feelings about homelessness and you think that mocking that in any way that turns you off. Okay, maybe you might. I'm saying there might be reasons that are not anti-Semitic to hate this film. But if you are on record as hating this film and you're not willing to have the conversation about how that hatred might be informed by ugly stereotypes about Jews and Jewish women, then I'm sorry, but then you have to own it. Or I at least get to lay it on you, because that. If you're not having that conversation, and we're talking about the whole world right now, this film made $149 million, and I can't find anywhere where anyone talks about this film and anti-Semitism when in the first scene, the film tells you that that's what it's about.
Yeah. And like Jill isn't like, and people write about the character Jill as if it's like this unheard of type of woman that would never exist in a movie ever. And like, why would they have this person in this movie like this? And I'm watching the movie, and my wife is watching. We're both like, "Oh, that reminds me of so and so," and that's like, people we remember fondly, people we like, and like he's showing you a type of lady that's not allowed to be in movies, that isn't allowed to be the star of movies. Sure, it's a man in drag doing that, but like there's something there. There's something about like you really like Jill in this movie, and you kind of don't like Jack so much. Like the opposite of what you think the movie is from watching the trailer of the movie.
Yeah. Or what you think. I think most people associate Adam Sandler with a kind of comedy that you wouldn't expect to be a champion of women, or it's like a certain type of woman who is usually not favored by bros, right?
Yeah.
You just don't expect that. And I think that's part of what makes this film really special for Adam Sandler, because it really does, as much as Uncut Gems or Punch Drunk Love make you change the way you think about Adam Sandler. I feel like this film has to make you change the way you think about Adam Sandler and his whole bro comedy shtick thing, because it's not coming from a place of a lack of awareness. And I don't know what clip you're going to have us include, but one of the scenes that, I guess we should talk about Al Pacino in this film, because he is so wonderful.
So good. Like I when I first saw this movie and I was trying to tell everybody that it's great and nobody wanted to listen, I was like, this is the best Pacino performance since like Heat. Like this is the best, like this is the most good acting he's done. Like he should get an Oscar for this movie. And what's great too is when you saw the trailer and saw Al Pacino trailer, you thought, oh, that'll be a cameo. He is like the third character of this movie. Like after two Adam Sandler characters, the third top character is Al Pacino. Like he is a star of this movie.
Yeah.
It's not a cameo. He is in the movie for the whole movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's really funny and really great. And he messes with his own persona in wonderful ways. But he has like the first scene in the film that made me cry. There's a scene, hope you've seen it, spoilers galore, where there has to be in a twins movie where Jack pretends to be Jill to get Al Pacino to be in his commercial. And first of all, I love the way, like in a scene that could be all about gay panic or camp, neither of those, that's not what it's about at all. It is total, in a movie that's so outrageous and crazy, it's just real. It's like he made the stakes around it, the way he does it, the jokes around it, and then the dynamic between Pacino and Adam Sandler as Jill is done really well. And then there's a moment when when Jack as Jill is asking Al Pacino what he sees in Jill, saying like, "What do you see in me? What? I don't even know what you see in me. I'm so annoying." And when Al Pacino tells Jack what is so wonderful, telling Jill why she is so wonderful. And yeah, Jack's fine, but he's the lucky one, and you're the one who has such a big heart, and you see Jack realizing, like, so you have this great actor, one of the greatest actors in the world, delivering this beautiful elegy, this like a just expressing how wonderful this woman is to this guy, in pretending to be that woman. And as he realizes he sees his sister through Al Pacino's eyes in that moment, it's so beautiful and heartbreaking. And it cracks me open just thinking about it. Like, this is a guy who appreciates that kind of woman, that girl from the Bronx, that Penny Marshall. And he sees past what all these other people see. And because he's Al Pacino and he's giving us that, you have to listen. And I think that's probably my favorite moment in the whole movie. It's so good. It's so good. And it's so good, not just it transcends comedy. That's just a beautiful, beautiful moment that's really, really true. And it gets kind of crazy after that. We can talk about that. And there's other good stuff after that. But that moment just, thank you, Al, and thank you, Adam. Wow.
And yeah, like, it's just, Al Pacino's really, like, he's not phoning it in. He's not just showing up and doing like, "I'm Al Pacino in a movie, pay me." Like, he's acting, even though he's playing himself. He gets to bring some of his Shakespeare to this. Like, he is a big fan. Al Pacino in real life is a big fan of Richard III and made that great documentary Looking for Richard. And then in this, he gets to make fun of that and do Richard III on stage, and then like call someone in the audience out for using their phone, having a freak out. At the end, he shows up as Don Quixote and he's fighting a ceiling fan. And so you get to see this kind of fun side of Al Pacino that you never really get to see in movies, because he's never really cast in a lot of comedies. Like, the other time, like, he's really fun in Dick Tracy, speaking of some Warren Beatty.
Yeah.
So when he's allowed to kind of open up and have fun, it's much more interesting than when like Robert De Niro was trying to have fun in the movie just by being like a dirty grandpa or whatever. Like, Al Pacino's still like really acting and really doing a great job while having a great time and being totally silly. It just all builds to, this is a spoiler alert, so please watch this movie. It all builds to him doing this Dunkin' Donuts commercial for the Dunkachino, where it's Al Pacino in a donut vest dancing and making like constant references to other great Al Pacino movies, but with donut puns. Never thought you'd see it, but man, is it amazing.
And I love that it's also organic to the Adam Sandler verse, because of that whole thing of like using, like in Happy Gilmore, getting the corporate sponsorship was part of the plot. And then in this, like, so they have this great commercial that it builds up to, and then it ends with burn it. Like,
burn this.
It's like great. Even that has this sort of like, I love it. It's like that end of Citizen Kane or Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, we get to see this thing, but nobody else is. It's just it's certainly not the thing that you want for that you're expecting, or you even that is the top thing you celebrate about this film. But it's just an expression of what a good film maker Adam Sandler is. And he didn't direct this film, but you have to figure he was, he had his finger on every aspect of it.
Well, it's directed by Dennis Dugan, who he does a lot of the Adam Sandler movies. And according to Norm Macdonald, Adam Sandler kind of like co-directs all of his movies, but doesn't take credit for it. So he's like kind of guiding whatever. Like, I don't know what part I mean, clearly every movie he makes is so much like a part of his thing. Like it's an Adam Sandler,
Well,
vehicle.
let's make the distinction, not like when it's not with Uncut Gems, or not when he's working with auteurs. So there's when he gives himself as an actor to these auteurs, and then there's the Adams, the sort of the, what's the name of his company? Happy Madison.
Happy Madison. Yeah. So like the Happy Madison stuff is like, he is definitely like the driving force behind the casting, the story. Like he supposedly, no matter who wrote the script, he'll come in and rewrite it, or with his people, they'll rewrite it. Like this movie was rewritten by his pal Alan Covert, who played the homeless guy in this, and Robert Schmeigel did a pass on it too. So it's like he has his team, he has his big monster that is the Adam Sandler machine. So like when Norm Macdonald says that he also directs all his own Happy Madison stuff, I totally believe it, in the way of like, you're on every day in the set, you're the star of the movie, it's your movie. So like, not to spit on Dennis Dugan, I'm sure he brings a lot to it, but it's definitely like this is an Adam Sandler movie. Unlike Punch Drunk Love or Uncut Gems, which are an auteur's version of an Adam Sandler movie.
Right.
Also, what's great about this movie is it's the closest we've gotten so far to a Donnie Brasco reunion, because Johnny Depp is in this movie. In one of my favorite scenes in the movie, when it's Johnny Depp in a Justin Bieber shirt with Al Pacino watching a Lakers game. Jill mistakes Johnny Depp for being a member of Duran Duran. And Johnny Depp is like, yep, that's me. I'm in Duran Duran. And so when you watch this movie, you're like, when they got Al Pacino's movie, and then Johnny Depp shows up uncredited for a good 8 minutes of this movie. And he doesn't give away cameos often. Like, you don't often get a Johnny Depp cameo. So like, that must have been Al Pacino bringing his friend Johnny to the set that day. And you get to see Al Pacino in a big fake beard. So it's like, I'm in heaven in that part.
Now, I want to go back for 1 second. So you were talking about the writers. Now, looking at the Wikipedia post on this, it says that Steve Coren and Adam Sandler were the writers of this. And Steve Coren is is that the one? Wait, but you also said that, what's his name? That
Alan Covert and Robert Schmeigel each did a rewrite on the movie.
Got it.
Uncredited. They're part of that Sandler universe. Like, those guys have been there since the beginning.
Right.
Yeah. And this movie was also the first time that I saw Eugenio Derbez in anything. He was a Mexican comedian who was very popular in Mexico. And this was the first movie, I believe, in America where he was allowed to be in a movie. And Adam Sandler saw him being really funny and thought, I need to introduce him to the world. And since then, he's become a star of his own movies. And in this, he's really good as Felipe and Felipe's grandmother. Another character who loves Jill. He's another person, and he's interesting because he is also kind of playing up the stereotype of this sort of Mexican immigrant, this Mexican American, where he will constantly walk into a room and say sort of the stereotypical thing that people think about these people, and then follow it with, I'm kidding. And everybody's like, oh, haha, you're kidding. And then he takes Jill to his family sort of reunion and plays his grandmother, this very odd character who doesn't talk, but she's just like this kind of grotesque older woman, which is Eugenio Derbez in makeup. And he is really good in this movie. I love him. Always. And I think it's also, let's keep talking about the people in this. There is some great people and then some darkness in some of the cameos. We get the great Geoff Pierson, who was in Rules Don't Apply. So this is now the second World is Wrong movie with him. He plays Jack's wife's father. That's one of those moments where you're just, again, the film doesn't say, hey, these are Jews and non-Jews together, but the Pierson, it's funny, this Geoff Pierson, he gets in both of this and Rules Don't Apply, he's sort of the
straight guy standing at the center of things while people do weird things around him, and sort of being like slightly uncomfortable and expressing through, sort of being silently polite. And what's the actress? I guess Valerie Mahaffey, who plays the wife, Bitsy Simmons. I feel like the stuff, very subtle stuff between her, well, not that subtle, but the stuff between her and Jill over the who sits where.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to a Seder with a Jewish family, you may recognize that dynamic. It was just, again, that just Jill's walk down the table to like get to her seat, that in those first 2 or 3 minutes, you just saw there were all these things that she did that were kind of normal and human, but you could tell that they made the Simmonses uncomfortable, and you could tell that they made Adam Sandler, who's trying to fit in with the Simmonses, I guess, in his own way, makes him uncomfortable. And a lot of these things are like the criticisms that get leveled at Jewish women and just Jews in general that are not seen as anti-Semitic, but it's like, oh, well, she's making something out of nothing, and she's overly dramatic, and she's loud, and like all of these are like, she's over the top about it, but these are the kind of things that people say about Jewish women without saying, oh, she's so Jewish. It'd be like, oh, she's so dramatic, and she's so loud, and she just she just can't let things go. And it's like, there it is. We have Jill giving us this perfect example of that in a really adorable and funny and beautiful way. And you're like, yeah. So anyway, kudos to Geoff Pierson for and Valerie Mahaffey for playing such great sort of straight characters.
Yeah, Geoff Pierson kind of reminds me of Robert Stack. Like, I'd see Geoff Pierson hosting Unsolved Mysteries in 2020. Like, he has that kind of like stern white guy, sort of like no nonsense, sort of like, he's not really frowning, but he's not smiling either. He just kind of like doesn't really, he's quietly annoyed or fuming about whatever's going on. And they play, Katie Holmes plays Jack's wife, and she's the type of lady you would normally see in movies. Yeah. That is the lady you always, like, that's the lady you see, and you having her play against Jill, who's the lady you don't normally see in movies. And I think there's a good dynamic there as well. And I think Katie Holmes, normally not in some silly shit like this, doing a pretty good job. Like, kind of like, she's also sort of playing the straight man to like the two Adam Sandlers, basically. She's in the middle of whatever situation they're in.
Yeah, that's something that the film doesn't really go into, and it references, but it's one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is just the Jack dynamic. Because it's weird. Like, he's definitely, like, he's a guy who stands up for his Jewishness in the beginning of the film, but he also he has this weird, like, so he married a woman who's not Jewish, and then according to Jill, he made her convert, or so, and that's sort of like hinted at, but then doesn't really get discussed, and it just feels like there's something. And maybe the film just can't do it. Like, it needs for Adam Sandler to be kind of a jerk and sort of like the Durwood of this film, the guy who doesn't get it. But I feel like there's another movie in which that character and the reasons that he is so embarrassed about who he is and where he comes from is explored. Like, I'd love to see, one of these auteurs remake Jack and Jill as a serious film where we really get into the darkness of a guy who is so like viscerally afraid of being associated with someone who is exactly like him. Like, that's that great scene in the movie theater where they're eating popcorn and farting and reacting just the same way to this movie, and the kid's like, "You're exactly the same."
But I think the movie does. It's there. It's just, you're right. It doesn't go into it deeply, but there's definitely something there. There's definitely, you can read this as he's sort of like, he's proud of being Jewish enough to accuse someone of being anti-Semitic, he has this embarrassment and the shame with his East Coast sister who's coming to LA, where he's made this career of himself, where he's surrounded himself with non-Jews and is bringing this like intense Jewishness into his life that he's trying to push away and keeps trying to get rid of her. He wants to get rid of her even before Hanukkah. Like he wants her there for Thanksgiving and then gone. And then she stays through all of Hanukkah. And then she's ringing in the new year with him. And he's just like, he's constantly trying to run away from her and doesn't understand why anyone would like her. Like, why would Al Pacino like her? Why would Felipe like her? And I think there's definitely like a layer to the movie that's this sort of like, not quite this self-hating Jew, but like definitely sort of like this, I'm embarrassed, like you said, like when you're embarrassed that like a family member would show up that kind of doesn't fit in with the rest of the people that you've surrounded yourself by or whatever in your current life or whatever. Like there's definitely it's hinted at for sure.
And this gets us to one of the funnier set pieces in the film when. So he's trying to hide Jill from the people he works with, but then his assistant throws a surprise party for him with all of his coworkers, and so they sort of like so they can all meet Jill, which freaks out Adam Sandler. But in this scene, we see Jill sort of talking to and mocking comedically, without sort of unknowingly mocking many iconic ad people. Like, so there's these cameos of people that we only know from advertising campaigns, which was another just sort of one of the fun ways that the film sort of plays not fast and loose, but plays with the whole idea of, okay, he works in an ad agency. We're going to get this fun Dunkin' Donuts commercial. And then we have Jill making fun of Jared Fogle.
I know. The one cameo that doesn't hold up in 2020.
What are you talking about? It's the one that really holds up. It's not like it's celebrating him. It's like it's making fun of all these folks.
Yeah.
So but I really enjoy it. That was just sort of, again, a very smart use of the world that he's in, that Jack's in, as a way to get all these famous people who are also probably pretty easy to get for your movie.
The ShamWow guy, John McEnroe.
Yeah.
And like the cameos don't stop in this movie. Like the Adam Sandler like can push a button and like a million famous people show up. You get Shaquille O'Neal cradling a giant ham wearing a weird wig, you know. Sure, why not? You get Price is Right thing with Drew Carey, which then means that Adam Sandler's now made 2 movies, each with the Price is Right host, because Bob Barker and Happy Gilmore. So clearly he likes Price is Right. You get Regis Philbin doing a anti-diarrhea commercial. It just goes on, like the people that showed for this. It's amazing, and I like. Let's talk about just for a second, like going back to the less funny stuff, but like it's interesting to me that it was really noticeable when watching this movie that this movie's about the holidays, but there's no Christmas. It's Hanukkah, and they talk about that it's Hanukkah. Like he's not pulling a Neil Diamond and just doing Christmas just because that's what people will expect from a holiday movie. Like he's celebrating Hanukkah in this movie, and there's a deleted scene on the DVD where Jill makes them build a menorah as big as the Christmas tree on the cruise ship and says, well, you need to have a giant menorah there too. And you have all these crewmen come out with set up this giant menorah. And like, I think for a lot of people knew about Hanukkah through Adam Sandler, like non-Jewish people, because he is such a champion of Hanukkah. Like he has the Hanukkah song, which people learned from that song what Hanukkah was, and all these famous people that are Jewish. And he has 8 Crazy Nights, and he's sort of like the guy in Hollywood really pushing that Hanukkah should be in a movie, even if it's subtly.
Yeah, I'm kind of bummed. I didn't see that scene. I'm kind of bummed that scene's not in the film. I would love that.
But it's interesting. It's like people that come out to see these movies, the people that make the Adam Sandler movies popular, is middle America. Like, that's the people that love to pay money to see or have the net. Like, those are the people that love. Like, these are people in like Nebraska. These are people in like Oklahoma that love Adam Sandler, and maybe
there are Jews in Nebraska and
I know,
Oklahoma.
But I mean, but you know, I think
we're not all
like,
from the Bronx.
He's considered sort of like the star, like regular people like Adam Sandler movies. And I think it's interesting that he's working in these ideas. And even if it's so subtle, you don't get it right away. But I think it's sort of like we were talking about with Michael Apted with his 2 movies. It's like when you make a Thunderheart and a documentary about the same thing, you're going to reach more people with Thunderheart. Like, you're going to sneak in things, or not even sneak in things in your Val Kilmer action movie, and you're going to reach people who are ignorant, and you're going to reach people who don't know. And Adam Sandler, I think, has always been really good at kind of putting those little things in there. Like, he could have easily not done the Hanukkah song and just did some jokey Christmas thing or something on SNL. But instead he went with the less popular holiday, you know, and made a song that people like, that aren't Jewish, that listen to it every holiday time. It's just, I really like that he's not ashamed of his Jewishness and never has been.
And as you were talking, it also made me think, so just like my mother, when my mother watched it, her feeling was not, oh, this is the way that Jewish women are treated. Her thing was, this is the way that women are treated. So I can totally see someone who didn't even think about the fact that this family's Jewish, but just think about, oh, well, what's it like to be a non-tradition, like someone going to California to visit your cool relative and feeling like you're not as attractive as all the people who are around him, and you don't know how to talk the way they talk, and there's something about you, maybe you have a Southern accent, or maybe you are kind of heavy, or you wear clothes that aren't as cool, and I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling, and I think a lot of women probably could relate to that feeling. Again, like I said, my mother, who is a Jewish woman, took me pointing out the Jewish aspect of it before she would even accept it. She was like, no, this is just about sexism and about the way women are treated. And so I guess that also speaks to the sort of universality of it, and to, again, the craftsmanship of filmmaking, that you can make a film that speaks to a wide and diverse audience while also telling a very specific story for an audience that is, you know, the closer you get to it, the more power it has.
Can you just imagine someone coming to a studio and be like, we're going to make a big comedy about anti-Semitism? I think that would never have happened. But when he
well, that's the thing, is Adam Sandler doesn't have to pitch his movies anymore. That's the great thing. I mean, he has that sort of auteur thing of like, if I'm in it, if it's an Adam Sandler movie, it's going to make money, so I can then do something that's actually really good, and I don't have to convince you that it's good. And I wish, you know, that's what I want people to do with their celebrity.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Woo, man. I think we're the first people to really dig into this movie like this. You know? And that's too bad.
Well, I hope we're not the last.
Like, I'm tired of the Sandler hate. I'm tired of people. Like, I think a lot of people who don't like this movie never actually watched it in the first place. I think it's like a lot of movies we cover and will cover, is people have these preconceived notions. Like, they look at the poster or they just hear about it and they're like, crap, dismissive. And they just stamp it as like this movie gets an F, moving on. And I feel that way when you read the reviews from people. It doesn't seem like maybe they watched 5 minutes of it and then just like phoned in their review, or just were already coming in and being like, this movie's shit. I won't even try to think for a second about anything interesting about it. And then it doesn't help when you have groups like the Raspberry Awards. Like, this movie has won more Raspberry Awards than any other movie. And I completely disagree with the Raspberry Awards. I don't know what your feelings are. I'm imagining they're similar to mine. But it's like, this movie got worst director, worst actor, worst actress, worst supporting actor, the Al Pacino. Like, it just like 11 awards. It's like, it's so bad. And supposedly the people that vote for the Raspberries don't actually even have to watch the movie. They just can just be like, we hate Adam Sandler, he's stupid. Let's just give it these awards of how shitty it is. And I hate the Raspberry Awards for doing stuff like that. And we're going to cover so many movies that they think are really bad. Because it's just stupid that they even exist.
I think since we've done a pretty good job of establishing that if you have overwhelming hatred towards this film, it says something about you. It's kind of nice that the Raspberry Awards really outed themselves, because we can now hang that on them. You really, you really are anti-Semitic, sexist bullies over there, aren't you? So there's another couple of pieces I really wanted to get into with this. So first of all, we didn't really talk about the twins aspect of it, and the film, again, sort of referencing our old friend Warren Beatty, the interviews at the beginning and at the end with the twins felt very much like Reds, and the interviews with
I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing, and I thought, like, are we the only, like, I know you're going to think the same thing, and it's just like, are we the only people to make the comparison between Reds and Jack and Jill? But it really is, like, I think because Warren Beatty was in my head from recently doing Rules Don't Apply, but, like, yeah, it's like, this is Reds. This is the beginning of Reds. Like, you're putting documentary at the beginning of your fictional film. Brilliant.
Yeah. Those were really great. And and so I need to tread lightly around this, but I have a couple of cousins who are twins, and they have a complex relationship that I don't always understand. And my great grandmother, who came to this country and brought our line to this country from a little shtetl in Russia. She had a twin, and they had a very complex and fraught relationship. And so I was just kind of curious, and I don't know. I mean, usually twin movies are played for, like, they're either played for horror or for a comedy in a different way, but the sort of the fraught relationship between these two, it just made me want to talk to more twins about this film, because if you go to the trouble to have all these authentic twins in your movie that you're interviewing, and then it seems like those interviews inform the script, then it is sort of like that Michael Apted Thunderheart incident at Oglala thing. There's a little bit more truth in your comedic or dramatic portrayal of it, because actual people who, you're not just making up twins and then coming up with goofy ways of expressing it. Yeah. So do you have any twins in your life? Have you thought about the twin aspect of this film?
I have some friends who are twins and who've had some twins. And I think what this movie gets right and that some movies get wrong is because, like, always in movies, twins are played by the same actor or actress. It's like Parent Trap or whatever. And they tend to go like the way they portray them as usually as identical. Usually they're identical twins, and they try to make it where, like, one is the loud one and one's the quiet one. And this movie starts like that, but you really do see them as two very different people, where there are similarities for sure, but then there is their uniqueness. And I think that gets lost in a lot of portrayals of twins. It tends to be like, we're going to kind of have them be sort of the same in a way, or wear the same clothes or whatever. And because I'm guessing they're fraternal twins, right? That's the one where it's a boy and a girl, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's why it's different. It's different than just having them be the same. But I like that it gets into, like, the twin talk thing, and Jack being like, I know what you're talking about. And Jill being like, yeah, we have our own language. And And I think it just does a good job of making it a very believable, at least in my eyes, like what twin siblings are like. I could be wrong. Like, I would be interested to hear if there's any twins listening, or even triplets. Do they get any of this right, or is this way off the mark? Like, did Dennis Dugan and Adam Sandler like really ask a lot of questions of these twins they interviewed to get to help mold this movie? I don't know, but it doesn't feel false. It doesn't ring as false to me.
Now, there is one thing that rings as false to me. Sorry, folks. If this ruins the movie for you, I'm sorry, but it. So, you have to have seen the movie to understand what I'm referring to. So I was talking about that great scene with Jack playing Jill and Al Pacino, where he realizes and starts to really appreciate how great his sister is, and then he goes back to the ship, which he was only able to get to via helicopter from Al Pacino.
Yeah.
And somehow he gets the helicopter back to the ship, gets there, and finds that Jill has gone back to the Bronx. I don't know how she managed to get off the ship and go back to the Bronx, but whatever she did, Jack and his whole family do the same thing and manage to get off this New Year's cruise to make it back to a bar in the Bronx to have a really great scene where, again, the second time I cried in the movie, a great scene of him standing up for his sister. And you just gotta not think about it, which doesn't help that I'm pointing it out.
Well, all those cruises always do stops on port. So my guess is they stopped at a port and they took a cab to the airport and flew away. Like, they're not just on the water, though. Like, cruises aren't just out on the water the whole time. Like, every day they stop in at a port and you walk around and you play a tour.
Wait a second. You know? But how? Okay, so Adam Sandler goes to Al Pacino. Jack goes to Al Pacino in the evening, comes back that night, and Jill has already left. How did she get off the ship?
They probably stopped at a port.
In the middle of the night?
Sure. They moored or something.
No.
Or she took a pontoon, took a little boat to shore.
Jill's mad.
She took one of the lifeboats.
She just rode the jet ski. She brought the jet ski.
Exactly. Brought the jet ski.
Okay. So
took the jet ski.
That's my one ruining moment. Now I have another appreciative moment, which is, so this film was released on 11/11/11, November 11th, 2011. And 11 is kind of like twins.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's that. But then if you look, I did a little research on the Kabbalistic meaning of 11, thinking about the Jewishness of this film. And I'm just going to read to you from something I found online from the Kabbalah experience. We find the number 11 in the spices used for the incense burned in the temple. According to the tradition, 10 of the spices were sweet-smelling. The 11th was foul-smelling. The rabbis explain that when mixed, the foul-smelling spice created a stronger, sweet smell. In a sense, the incense needs a bit of its opposite to achieve its full potential. And that feels like a perfect description of Jill.
Yeah.
Of she's the foul smelling element that makes everything sweeter. And that may sound like it's a dig, but in terms of this, it's like that idea. Foul smelling doesn't mean that she's gross. It just means that she is that element that doesn't fit, that makes everything better.
Yeah.
Like if everyone was fitting in with Katie Holmes's family, then there wouldn't be room for their kids to be as weird as they are. Like they get to be more human because Jill's around, because there's this foul smelling, this sweat stained, loud, embarrassing person who basically makes it a family. Like that's kind of the definition of a family, is like there's some people in your family who are annoying, and you know what, you love them anyway, and that's what makes you a family. If you own the people who that's what distinguishes them from your friends. Your friends are the people you choose, and that you might not want to be friends with someone, and then you're not. But you don't have that choice if you're in a family that has that's healthy. Like, that annoying person's going to be there at every family gathering, and in a way, that's how you know that you're a family and you love each other, because, and my family knows that I am that annoying person. So don't think I'm talking about any of you. If you're listening, don't think that this is about you. This is about me and maybe my brother. You know us. We're a little bit weird. But you love us anyway, and that's how we know we're family. So I felt like there was something. I don't know if Adam Sandler intended that, but that might just be. I'm sure that he intended for 11, 11, 11, and maybe there was an awareness of the twins thing. And who knows? Maybe he's got some Kabbalists in his life who said, "Hey, 11, 11, 11, man, get that foul-smelling 11th part in there."
That's amazing. I love it.
And Al Pacino's like, "Oh, that's the part I love. Let me lay in your sweat stain."
Oh, it makes me so happy that you really like this movie a lot. I wasn't expecting you to. Like, I really thought that maybe you were going to be like, "I don't know, Bryan, I don't know." So I was really happy. It makes me very happy.
Really?
I always hope when I pick these movies that you are going to really like them. But I wasn't expecting you to really, really like it in this way. I don't know. Just because I'm so used to people not liking this movie so much. I think I'm used to showing it to people or telling people about it, and them just kind of giving me a pat on the back, being like, "Okay, sure thing."
Really? So I guess I was under the impression that most of the people that you shared it with came around to it, but that's not the case?
I think that it depends on the people. It's like strangers. It's a weird thing where it's like, I think they didn't give it a chance, but I've definitely converted a lot of people in general to being Adam Sandler fans through this movie. This came out at a time when people had completely written him off, at least movie people. So at the video store, I was really pushing this and really pushing Grown Ups too. And That's My Boy, and being like, these movies are amazing. You need to see these movies. And so I definitely converted the Vulcan video staff. And what's interesting is a lot of my friends that see it, I had a couple that watched it. She was Jewish. She loved it. He is not Jewish. He hated it. But she is this very big personality, great Jewish woman that freaks out a lot of people. And a lot of people have told me, "Oh, she's her personality is just it's a lot to handle sometimes." And I love her. I think she's amazing, and I think it's great. And of course, she loved the movie. He did not like the movie as much. I think that was really funny. What's interesting is whenever I would put this movie on often in the store at Vulcan, and it would definitely pull people in. People would just be waiting in line and being like, "What is this?" Because they would be enjoying it, and I'd be like, "Oh, it's Jack and Jill," and they were like, "Well, I heard that movie was terrible," and I'm like, "Well, clearly." You heard wrong, because you're enjoying it and this movie's good. And so people were definitely once they actually were forced to watch it, then most of them like it. But there's a lot of people that just don't like it so much. It's
like the Palmolive of films. You're soaking in it.
And this, for whatever reason, I'm not a Jewish woman, so I don't know why I'm drawn to this movie or Adam Sandler, but I like this movie more than any of his other movies. I've seen this movie no less than 30 times, actually sat and watched it. And I'm always thinking of the quotes from it, the "Where were you?" that the bird always says. I always think that. Or the line where she says, "Skype, what is that? It sounds anti-Semitic." Whenever someone talks about Skype, I always think of that line. Or Al Pacino just yelling, "Popcorn!" It's just, this movie just burned its way into my brain. It's just a part of my life that I will never stop watching it and never stop championing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, so while we're on the subject of Adam Sandler, you mentioned his new film, Hubie's Halloween, which it's not as new when you're hearing this, but I've already heard one withering and terrible review of it. You've seen it, I imagine.
Yeah, it's great.
Good. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to celebrate it because people who are listening to this may have heard the same bad reviews that I heard.
It's it doesn't go as deep as this movie. Like there's not as much subtext, but it's like a really fun kind of like you don't get a lot of good fun family Halloween movies. It's got all the crazy over the top humor. Steve Buscemi is great in it, as he is in every Adam Sandler movie he shows up in. And it's Sandler again playing like a weird character. And the movie also kind of speaks. The movie's interesting because it has the subtext in this one is it's about him in his movies, because he's about this he plays this character that everyone in the town hates and everyone thinks is an idiot and is disgusting and just a worthless piece of shit. But he's actually really right, and he's actually like smarter than everybody else and better than everybody else. And so it's definitely like making a comment on maybe the hate that, I mean, and again, like with Jack and Jill, everyone's instantly like dismissive of it and says it's crap. And people, the few reviews I read have referred to it as, this is the vengeance that Adam Sandler is having on the world for not being nominated for Best Actor for Uncut Gems. As if that's how anyone would make a movie.
Yeah.
But and I only read these kind of reviews for his movies. I don't see this kind of stuff for any other crap or any movie that people don't like. For some reason, people really, really want to hate Adam Sandler. And even when they get one back by Uncut Gems, there's something about it that they really want to make. Like, there's something about where they're prideful of their hate. Where like critics can't wait to be like, I will write the most hateful, scathing review of an Adam Sandler movie. I will shit on it the biggest. And I think it makes sense that like I'm as equally obsessed, and they're right next to each other on my shelf in my movie room. Jerry Lewis and Adam Sandler right next to each other. Like, and they're both people that a lot of people hate and a lot of people don't like. I wonder why.
Yeah. What do they have in common?
So
maybe
I'm
just saying maybe we should have a conversation about anti-Semitism from time to time.
Maybe we should. And
if Adam Sandler is the guy who's making this conversation happen, it gets harder and harder to dismiss him as an artist.
Yeah.
If that's what he's doing. If he's a great actor in these films by auteur directors and an incredibly successful comedic actor in terms of people liking his films, not critics necessarily, and if he's actually taking on anti-Semitism and saying if you're proud of hating Jill or of Adam Sandler, then maybe there's something that's behind that makes it, even if it's not what motivates you, what is it about you that recognizes that if I pick on Adam Sandler, people will celebrate me and say that's great in a way that doesn't happen if I pick in, like, no one would say that stuff about Ava DuVernay, and nor should they. I mean, she's great. But if you came out and was like, we're like, oh, Ava DuVernay, she's so pretentious. She thinks she's all that. Oh, blah, blah, blah. People would be like, yeah, dude, that's a kind of weirdly sexist and racist. I mean, you could make a criticism of it, but if you're just having fun kicking her, then we're going to defend her. But something about Adam Sandler says, in the culture, says, kick him. We love it. And he can take it. Have fun. We all love picking on that. Even if I didn't see Jack and Jill, I'll use it as a punchline because I know that people will laugh. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're motivated by that, but if you're not questioning it, and if you are just happy to make sort of bullying jokes to the crowd, which I love. We'll get at the end of the movie. There's a great scene where Jill's getting bullied by these awful girls who I didn't even realize that one of them was being played by David Spade.
I hope you thought it was a real woman.
I did.
Oh man, that's great.
And when I just loved when when Adam Sandler and Jill when the two Adam Sandlers stood up to them. It was great. There was a lot of standing up for each other in this movie that also was like a real contradiction. That's one of the sort of internalized anti-Semitic things for Jews, is that feeling of like nobody's ever going to, like, when the mob turns on me, nobody's going to have my back, which is one of the, maybe one of the things that I like about you is that you're such a passionate defender of these Jewish artists that it just makes me feel like, oh, well, that's what a good ally does.
I have a tattoo of Shemp Howard on my body, so I have to be a defender for life of Jewish people.
Yeah, that's what
I
Jews
signed up
got
for.
at the one funny concentration camp. Just put Shemp Howard on all the arms. So anything? Oh, I wanted to ask you one other question from the Adam Sandler tip. Are there any other films? Because we may not get to them. Might be our Adam Sandler film for a while.
Yeah.
Are there any other Adam Sandler films that you think are candidates, and probably all of them, but specifically one or two that you feel like are real candidates for The World Is Wrong treatment, or that people should check out as being much better than what they've heard?
That's My Boy is really interesting. And it deals with the subject matter that's covered in 80s comedies of like the hot teacher hooking up with the student, like Private Lessons, the Sylvia Crystal movie. And so it's about that. And the teacher's played by Susan Sarandon. And it gets into more of the Mary Kay Letourneau territory of like, this is actually really inappropriate and not cool at all, even though all your friends are petting on your back being like, awesome. And it goes into basically like, no, you were molested. You're being molested by your teacher, which is dark. And the movie like really gets into that. But it's within the context of this guy was laid by his hot teacher comedy starring him and Andy Samberg. And it's brilliant. And it's by the guy who did the show, Happy Endings, and his new show with Don Cheadle on Showtime. What's that show called? It's the guy, he did that Black Friday. Is that what it's called?
Black Monday.
Same creator of that wrote this movie. And there's a lot of subtext, a lot of layers, much smarter than you think, but still works as a really zany, crazy, over-the-top Adam Sandler movie. Like, that movie has a lot going for it, for sure. So that's I think the next one. Like, if you've seen Jack and Jill and you're kind of on the vibe that we're going on here of actually thinking about it and reading into the more smart stuff in it, That's My Boy also, I think, fits very well into that kind of comedy.
Cool. That's My Boy. I've seen it. It is funny.
Yeah.
That's just like the year after this one.
Yeah.
Hi there. I'm Ankara Savone.
And I'm Shauna Lane, and we're the Gone Girls.
Come listen to our podcast, The Gone Girls, on the Paper House Network.
We're two comedians based out of New York City, and we podcast bi-weekly or whenever we feel like it.
Need to figure out life? Us too. And we do it by interviewing anyone. We dive in deep with comics, improvisers, club managers, doctors, wait staff, mostly from the comfort of Shauna's Subaru.
We are trying to figure out how to get through this thing called life with our senses of humor intact.
Join the Gone Girls on the Paper House Network.
So we can also find you, Andros, on your own show, the Radio 8-Ball Show, where you ask questions, and the questions are answered by songs picked at random, and then they're interpreted like musical tarot cards. And you have had many times where we've talked about anti-Semitism, not via Adam Sandler, but just in its own way. Was there any discussion in particular, like an episode that you think is like a good one that like kind of goes into some of these subject matters?
Well, it's a good one, but it's a bad one. So I guess that's one of the other things that I love about this film and just this conversation is like, this is the first time that I've been able to have a conversation about anti-Semitism that hasn't been an argument or hasn't devolved into getting attacked for it. I mean, who knows? Maybe I don't know what's going to happen after this, but even if I do, I feel like at least we'll get attacked for it together as opposed to just people picking on me. And a pretty good example of that is the episode that I did with a singer-songwriter named David Rovics, a really, really great songwriter, a great episode. And in the episode, we're able to have a conversation that's pretty good, but afterwards, and you'll see, and if you check it out, and you'll hear in my introductions to it and whatnot, that it led to just a lot, like a very ugly season for me in Olympia, getting attacked by my neighbors, like online, not actually physically attacked, thank goodness. So so I guess in the if you're interested in having more of, or hearing more of a conversation about that, you could check out that episode. And David also is a big critic of Israel, which is something we didn't talk about, but that's one of the big divisive conversations that comes up when trying to deal with a conversation about Jewishness and anti-Semitism. I'll just say for the record, if anyone's listening, I am a critic of Israel's policies as well, but I'm also conscious that a lot of conversations that are critical of Israel can end up tipping into a conversation that feels anti-Semitic, just like being critical of Adam Sandler is okay, but there's times when it can tip into anti-Semitism. And so finding that line and being able to communicate about it is really, can be very difficult. And while I definitely encourage people to check out Radio 8 Ball and check out those episodes, I just, I want to take this moment to just say, thank you for sharing this film with me and for allowing me, this is a Hanukkah miracle, allowing me to have a conversation. I actually even asked it on one of the most recent episodes of Radio 8 Ball. I asked, when will it be easier to talk about anti-Semitism? And I thought that I was asking about something that would never happen. And then here it is, just a couple weeks later, and we're actually having it, and it's not an argument, and we're laughing, and we have smiles on our faces, and we got to see a great, funny movie, and both as guys be allies to women in that conversation too. It's just all goodness. So I don't know what the year is going to bring. We're around the solstice, the dark time of the year, but I feel like this episode has really been a festival of light.
Hooray!
So, thank you. So should we tell the listeners where they can find? I always do it. You want to try it? You want to try telling people where they can find us?
I'm going to mess this up. I have a terrible memory of things. So we are on the Paper House Network. Hooray! And you can communicate with us on Instagram at The World Is Wrong Podcast. I basically run the Instagram. I will answer your questions. We recently, I don't know if you've looked through our mail, we have a fan, a man reached out to us, and he asked if we would do some movies, and I think there's other people should do the same thing. I think it'd be great to request stuff, and we will definitely consider it, and definitely think about ideas for, episodes. Like we don't have to pick them all. Like if you have an idea out there, tell us. But there's a man named Galen Howard. If I'm saying his name wrong, I'm sorry. But he asked if we would like to do like Where the Buffalo Roam, which I think is a great idea. I love that movie. And that was definitely a movie that gets overshadowed by Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and Where the Buffalo Roam is great. So that's thanks for that recommendation. I think that might be a future episode. Great idea. So keep sending us ideas. Keep reaching out to us.
Love that film.
So I think, that's where you can find it. We're on, where else can we find us? I'm terrible at,
Let me jump in and help you out here. The website is theworldiswrongpodcast.com, and if you want to send us an email, you can send us emails at contact@theworldiswrongpodcast.com. And I think other than that, you nailed it there, Bryan. Bravo, Mazel Tov.
And you can find me on the director's wall with AJ Gonzalez. We are taking a hiatus because because we're recording this in October, also known as Shocktober, and I follow the strict rule of only watching horror. That's the household rules, only horror for the whole month. So I'm deep into watching all the Friday the 13th movies again on Blu-ray. So no new Coppola news other than maybe now is when we're at Rumblefish. Maybe I'll just keep saying that until we get it. I'm going to guess by mid-December, Rumblefish? I'll be totally wrong. Who knows? But
and maybe it's possible that there's people out there who haven't listened to the whole M. Night Shyamalan episode season,
Go.
or caught up on all of the other Coppola films that you've covered.
And
so I'm a big fan of the podcast, and I highly recommend people check it out.
And I'm going to be making an Instagram for that soon because it's been helpful with our thing. And so I thought maybe I should go on the internet with the other podcast. Maybe it'll attract some people to listen to it, because that podcast isn't lucky enough to have a nice network like Paper House. We're just blowing in the wind, hoping that people catch us.
Well, it's great. And what are we going to be covering next week, Bryan?
Whoa, man, I'm excited. We are doing more John Bryan. As if you couldn't handle it, well, we're going to make you handle it. It's going to be amazing. There's so much John Bryan you didn't even knew existed in this world.
Yeah, the John Bryan Part 1 that focused on just his film score work, it ran like a normal length of an episode. And then when we started to dig into all of the artists that he's produced or performed on their records, or just his own solo career or as a member of bands, the episode just got longer and longer and longer. And we thought, you know what? This feels like kind of like a New Year's party. You know, you could, we're all going to be, a lot of us are going to be, most of us, the smart ones of us are going to be celebrating New Year's pretty much alone. So we got to find our parties where we can. And so you get to party in this episode with people like Amy Mann, Kanye West, Fiona Apple, Beyonce, Mac Miller. Who in the John Bryan episode would you most like to spend your New Year's with?
Man, you know what? I'm going to go easy and say I'd like to spend it just with John Bryan. He seems like he'd be entertaining enough. He can play all these instruments. I can just request a whole jukebox of songs and he'd be able to play them for me.
You know what? I would go with that, but I would do it as a seance to Tom Petty, who he played on his record. So we could get together with John Bryan and then summon the spirit of Tom Petty. And I'm sure that would lead to this crazy improvised musical session, and it would go into all these exciting places, and Tom would emerge from the earth and give us a message for the rest of the 21st century. So I can't promise that's going to happen, but you might feel like that. It might feel a little bit like that if you enjoy the episode. So you have that to look forward to. And then 2021, surely to be one of the most joyous years on this planet.
Yeah.
We hope. And now we're about to hear the Dunkachino commercial we told you about at the beginning of this episode. If you can name all of the Al Pacino references in the Dunkachino commercial, please send them all to us at contact@theworldiswrongpodcast.com. And if you get them all, you get to choose a film we will cover on this podcast. And if you like, you can join us on the show to talk about it. And now, it falls to me to let you all know that I know it's rough, but just remember, wherever you are, the world is wrong. And it's probably wrong about you.
Something's brewing at D&D.
Wow!
Al Pacino!
It's not Al anymore. It's Dunk.
Dunkachino?
Don't mind if I do.
What's my name?
Dunkachino.
It's a whole new game.
Dunkachino.
You want creamy goodness? I'm your friend. Say hello to my chocolate blend. Attica, hoo-ah, lottie light. This whole trial is out of sight. They pull me back in with hazelnut too. Caramel swirl, I know it was you. Everyone wants my Dunkachino. Can't get enough of my Dunkachino. Kids from 7 to 17 lining up for my Dunkachino. What's my name?
Dunkachino.
Dunkachino.
And boom, there you have it. It's actually 32 seconds, so I gotta lose 2 seconds. Maybe you can tell me what part you would lose, but I think we are getting there.
Burn this.
Radio 8 Ball.
Andras here. When I'm not co-hosting The World Is Wrong podcast, I'm hosting and producing the Radio 8-Ball podcast, where we answer questions by picking songs at random, like picking musical tarot cards. We've hosted musical divinations for people like John C. Reilly, Patricia Arquette, Tig Notaro, and Fred Armisen, and hosted over 200 songwriters, providing the randomly chosen answers from Inara George and Dan Byrne to Mose Allison and Alan Toussaint. That's Radio 8-Ball, all one word. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and download our app from the iTunes App Store.
Show.